Last week, Coach Rhodes, it was Zoom. I'm glad to see you actually here in person here inside our studios here on campus. 4-0 start for the Dogs. Well, could you have scripted a better start to the season so far?
Well, when you look at the columns of wins and
Yes.
losses, no. You know, sports they're funny because the games are never played out the way that you envision it in your head. And that's what makes sports so great because you just never know what's going to happen. And, you know, we're where we wanted to be 4-0 at this point. Um, we've done some really great things offensively. We played tremendous defense. We've had moments to where we've pitched well. The biggest thing is right now is we're having innings in a game that are blowing up, and we're having just too many big innings that are costing us on the pitching side of it. But the one thing that I do continue to look forward to is we've had one guy so far that's came back for a second appearance, and that was Mike Hansel, and his second appearance was very good. And I think, all the new guys that we have beginning of the season, a lot of nerves out there on the mound. We get caught up in looking at the position players. The position players, they get those nerves out first, second at bat, and then
Yeah.
now they're 15, 20 at bats in, and they're calm, cool, and collected in the box. And every single pitcher, it might be the third or fourth game of the year. Well, that guy's going out there for his first time. But hopefully, as they get on the mound the second, the third time, they're kind of settled in, and we've seen them pitch extremely well against our offense. So I know that there's a lot of ability there. Um, the good thing is we've been winning ugly, and it'll be nice to start winning a little more pretty as we get going.
Coach Rhodes, one of the things, too, that's always impressed me about your teams from afar is, of course, the offensive side. You guys have always been able to swing it. And, of course, so far, when you've scored 14 runs in every game that you've played, that's where the eyeballs are going to go to. What's impressed you about just the approach, though? It's not just that you're just getting these runs. How do you like how you are getting the runs, how you're manufacturing them in key situations? It's not just swinging, hitting it over the fence all the time.
Yeah, I think when you look at what's been impressive is the reason we've been allowed to score so many runs and hit as many hits per game as we've gotten is that we haven't swung outside the strike zone very often. Our guys have been very good at when they throw it outside the zone that we've been taking those pitches. And we've been fortunate that we've also had some guys on base at big moments and got a big swing that's left the yard. Um, and so I think the biggest thing is honestly there's been a lot of balance on the offensive side, whether it's walking, actually getting a hit, hitting the ball over the fence. But then also, we've bunted a couple times early in the year, where typically in the past we haven't done those type of things. So I think now we kind of have more of a balance to where the team that is scouting us, the team that has to prepare for us, there's multiple things that they have to concentrate on. We've stolen several bases so far at the beginning part of the year too. So I like that we don't have to just rely on one thing, hit a ball over the fence to score runs. We can do it in multiple ways.
Matu Valle had a really good opening weekend for you. He was a guy that he's had starting experience. So, I mean, he played a ton for you a year ago. Where have you seen him progress from the fall into the winter and the early stages now here in the spring as you get going?
Yeah, he's a guy that, I think he kind of got overlooked a little bit last year just because he's not that big, physical, hit a home run type of player. But, he led our team in conference play last year in batting average. And he just brings a different dynamic to our team because he's one of the fastest college baseball players there is. I mean, he's just a lightning bolt on the field. So if he can just make a defender on the infield move left or right, he's typically going to be safe. But he's also added a lot of strength. He's put on some pounds this offseason. So the balls, he was typically a kind of a singles, leg out, a double type of guy. And now he's driving that ball through a gap. But I think also too, you just look back. I mean, he's an older kid. You look at our roster, a lot of maturity, and you can see that through our at bats. Nobody's taking at bats off. Everybody's playing extremely hard, but we're also understanding. Everybody knows their strike zone. I mean, that's been the biggest key is we know what a ball is, we know what a strike is, and we've been swinging at strikes, and we've been leaving, the borderline pitches off, and it's just allowed us to get in hitters counts, and then in those hitters counts, we've been making the opposing pitcher pay.
You mentioned knowing the strike zone and also knowing your strike zone. How much time do you take, Coach Rhodes, with your group in terms of, I don't even know if necessarily it's reinforcing it even throughout the week, but what are ways that you try to reinforce it? Because how important that is, and whether it's now in your February games or, of course, as you progress throughout the year and you ultimately get to a championship plate, which is what everybody ultimately strives to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing what a strike and knowing what a ball is something that we harp on every single day, whether that's, us throwing to the guys or whether that's machine work, but also understanding that, the one thing that we preach constantly is that we've got to get on base. It doesn't matter if it's a hit, walk, hit by pitch. The number one goal is to get on base and then cross home plate. So the more times that we can get on base, especially with the speed aspect that we bring this year, there's a concentration that goes into controlling the running game that allows our hitters to get better pitches because the mind's working on two different things. So I think the biggest difference and hopefully what carries us throughout the season is just the balance of offense that we're bringing to the table right now as far as being able to really make a pitcher stress in multiple different ways.
Well, one guy who's stressing pitchers right now, no question, is Steve. Last year had 18 home runs, so by game 18 he'll reach that total. So far, 4 home runs in 4 games. What have you seen from Steven that you look back at his numbers, even going back to when he transferred in from FAU, it wasn't like he was overwhelming powerful. What was it about his profile, his makeup, that you felt that you could tap into what you've ultimately been able to tap into?
Well, when we first started recruiting him, number one, his freshman year, he had a really good, solid freshman year as far as average goes. Didn't necessarily have the power. And then what really intrigued us is that, he had a left-handed bat, played middle infield, but when you looked at his defensive numbers, I mean, incredible defensive career. He's a better defender than what we thought we were getting. We thought we were getting a good defender. We got a tremendous defender. Probably one of the best second basemen that I've ever seen in college baseball. Just a tremendous defensive second baseman. Now, the power has been there since he showed up. Just an incredibly gifted, strong kid. And the biggest thing is we needed him to get the ball in the air more. The more that we could get the ball in the air, he's got so much power, the ball just really carries off his bat. And he's been able to do that over the last couple of years, just get a lot of balls up in the air. And, the biggest thing this year that's different than what he's been in the past is last year he's more of a free swinger. And he would get into counts and then chase outside the strike zone and put a ball in play weakly and kind of taking a bat out of his hands, where this year he's been leaving those pitches out, taking his walks, and then whenever he gets a good pitch to swing at, he's been punishing it.
One of the areas, Coach Rhodes, you think of all, and people talk about momentum, whatever you can do, but Friday nights can always be a tone setter. And I don't think there was any question that Aiden did his part for you on Friday. What stood out about him on Friday that you just liked, from his demeanor to the approach and how he did what you wanted him to do in terms of setting the tone for the weekend for everybody there on the starting mound?
Yeah, I mean, when you see it in person, it's got kind of an intimidating presence to it. One, he's a big-bodied kid up there on the mound, throws extremely hard, and it's like it feels like you're 0-1, 0-2 before that bat starts. It's kind of one of those pitchers where it's just like, man, constantly strike one, strike two, strike one, strike two. But then it also has he's got stuff to go along with, the strike throwing ability. And, when you throw as hard as he throws with the breaking ball that he has, but then there's that thing that you can't really measure, just that competitor. And you just kind of feel it, whether it's on your team or somebody's doing it against you. You're just like, man, this dude is just a super competitive kid. And he did exactly what we have seen all year that he's been here. I think just because he was a new guy, we haven't seen how it was going to go in an actual game. It kind of made you a little nervous, like, hey, is this really going to translate? And he didn't skip a beat. It looked like a legit Friday night starter. It was under the lights, and it looked like he was throwing 100. And, it was very, very good. The thing about that game is honestly, what kind of hurt him as far as getting more length in his outing was the fact that we had put up 11 runs and it was 11-0 after 5. And in that 5th inning, we scored 6, and the inning just drug on forever. He could have thrown 6, 7 innings that night and been tremendous, but hopefully allowing him to get out of there, it will help him this weekend.
How big, you brought up the point, a lot was your offense. They extend the innings, which is great because the more innings you have like that are obviously going to be productive from the standpoint as you go throughout the year, Coach Rhodes. But where you get with your pitching staff, you look at them like how much this time in the year do you look at, all right, how long do we let them go? How much you want to rest them? Because as we all know, I mean, innings take effect as you go on throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we looked at where his pitch count was, I mean, he was on the brink of being able to go one more inning for sure, possibly 2 at the beginning of the year. Now, if he was in, 3, 4, 5 weeks into it, he can get into 100, 115 pitches, and he probably could have honestly thrown 8, 9 innings that night. Biggest thing is we just want to monitor their workload in order to set him up for success as we get into conference play and beyond. And, there just wasn't much of a reason with the lead first weekend to extend him at that point, and that would be for anybody. But the biggest key is hopefully every single week we can continue to build on that pitch count, the times that he gets up and down. And honestly, even if the score would have been 11-0, but if the innings would have just been quicker, we probably would have ran him back out there. But I think that inning that we took him out, I mean, it was almost a 35-minute inning, and just sitting there for an extended period of time was probably just better just to get him out. And plus, we also needed to get other guys in.
Yeah.
When you look at that first weekend or the first part of the season, you're trying to get as many people on the mound for the first time as you possibly can. That way, that second, third time out, hopefully they settle in and they're kind of more their normal selves.
Knowing that you were able to get multiple guys that were able to go in. I think only 2 walks last night against UT Martin. I think you only had 4 on Friday night against Northwestern State. In terms of limiting free bases and relying on your defense, how would you grade your team so far through 4 games?
Now, we're competitive on the mound. It's an odd thing because when you're watching it live like we are in the dugout, it doesn't feel like the box score. And I don't know if that'll make sense to anybody, but it just doesn't seem like we're pitching with the runs that we're giving up right now. I will also say that spring baseball, the weather impacts spring baseball tremendously, and a lot of people don't understand that. But last night, I mean, it was 68, almost 70 degrees, and the wind was howling out to center and right field. Literally every single ball that went up in the air was either caught at the warning track or was going over the fence, and you didn't even have to hit the ball well. So when you look at some of the numbers, it's so deceiving because literally every single ball that went up in the air, you were just holding your breath hoping that it didn't go over the fence, and that's why we scored 14, they scored 11. But when you get on those days in the spring where the wind is so impactful of a game, sometimes you're going to give up a large amount of runs, and there's really just nothing you can do about it. You just hope that you throw enough strikes that when they do put one up in the wind, they only get 1 or 2 runs in that swing rather than you walk 2 or 3 and all of a sudden it's a grand slam. So I was just proud of the fact that we continued to throw strikes, and they scored some runs, but we didn't dodge bats because they were putting the ball in play.
You look at Central Arkansas this weekend, Coach, where you'll be going, which ironically I'm glad you and Jen just decided that you're going to be in Central Arkansas at the same time. So I know both of you talking to Jen earlier today, and I know she's excited. They're going to try to somewhat make their way to watch you guys play. I know you're going to try to watch them play too when you can. But outside, Central Arkansas took the defending champions really, really well in 2 games over the weekend to start off their season. What stood out about the Bears from what you've been able to gauge here? I know you had UT Martin last night as we recorded, but initially what stands out about Central Arkansas this year?
The biggest thing is they got a Friday night starter that is very, very good, that has a lot of proven success. He led their conference in strikeouts last year, punched out 108 guys, and he's got a really short arm action. He's 90-93, so the ball kind of jumps on you. But he's just got a strike throwing ability to him where it's, again, you step in the box and you feel like, I mean, it's already strike 1, strike 2. So our guys are going to have to be ready to hit from the get-go. I mean, his walk numbers are extremely low. His strikeout numbers are extremely high, so we have to be ready to swing the bats. The biggest thing, too, is they play in a big ballpark. You know, with the way that their ballpark plays, the way that they're throwing strikes, we're going to have to probably manufacture some runs, do some things offensively to where we, you know, hopefully can scrap, you know, claw, grab runs whenever we have a chance to, because it's going to be tough to hit one out of their park. Um, but they're throwing the ball extremely well as a collective group, and I think it'll be a fun challenge to go down there and kind of, you know, get our pitching on track and, you know, face a really good Friday night starter. And not that we haven't faced anybody to his caliber yet this year, but somebody like him who's actually proven that he can pitch on Friday nights and do it successfully will give us a true test of kind of where our offense is at.
Coach Rhodes, appreciate the time. What I look forward to is this time next week, you already had a home game.
That's right.
Already would have had a home game, hopefully after a really productive weekend down in Arkansas. Coach Rhodes, thanks so much for the time. We look forward to catching up with you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Once again, that was the head coach, Lance Rhodes. We'll have more on Saluki baseball here on SIUSalukis.com.